In the late 20th century, scientists confirmed something that should not exist in a world obsessed with calories, insulin spikes, and metabolic damage. A fruit with almost no sugar, no artificial chemistry, and no measurable glycemic load could make lemons taste sweeter than candy, vinegar taste like syrup, and beer taste like dessert. All without changing the food itself, all without entering the bloodstream as glucose, and all without triggering the hormonal cascade that drives obesity and diabetes. The effect lasted for nearly 2 hours, worked on anyone with functioning taste buds, and required no processing beyond eating a single red berry. It did not replace sugar by imitating it. It replaced sugar by bypassing it entirely. And then, quietly, without a dramatic ban or public debate, the United States made sure it would never reach grocery shelves as a food ingredient. The plant still exists. The berry can still be eaten, but its power was locked away, which raises the question that never goes away. If a fruit can make sugar obsolete, why is it illegal? Welcome to Heritage Harvest. If these stories matter, subscribe, hit the bell, and share to preserve our heritage. The story begins long before laboratories, regulators, or food conglomerates existed, in the humid forests of West Africa, where Cincipalum dulcificum, also known as miracle fruit, grew as an unremarkable evergreen shrub, producing small red berries that offered no obvious sweetness of their own. The Yoruba people did not cultivate it as a novelty or a trick. They used it as a tool. Before meals, especially meals built around sour grains, fermented foods, or palm wine, they chewed the berry slowly, coating the tongue, transforming bitterness and acidity into something rich and pleasant. It was not magic. It was practice. Long before nutrition science had language for receptors and proteins, people understood that this fruit could alter taste itself. By the time European explorers arrived on the West African coast in the early 18th century, the practice was already old. In 1725, the French explorer Chevalier de Marchais documented local people chewing a berry before meals and then consuming foods that would otherwise be sharply sour. He did not understand how it worked. He only noted that it did. For more than 2 centuries, the miracle fruit remained a botanical curiosity, mentioned occasionally in travel accounts and colonial plant catalogues, growing quietly in acidic soils with a pH low enough to kill most crops, thriving in heat, humidity, and partial shade, producing fruit only after 3 to 4 years of growth, and then continuing to bear twice a year for decades. It was slow, patient, and unsuited to industrial agriculture. It resisted frost poorly and demanded conditions modern supply chains disliked. No one saw a reason to extract value from it because no one yet understood what value actually meant. That changed in the 1960s, when Japanese researcher Kenzo Kurihara isolated the protein responsible for the fruit's effect and gave it a name, miraculin. It was not sugar. It was not a sweetener in the conventional sense. It was a glycoprotein, a complex molecule made of protein chains with carbohydrate side groups, and its behavior defied the logic of food chemistry. At neutral pH, miraculin binds to sweet taste receptors on the tongue and does nothing. It blocks them, inert and silent. But when acidic foods lower the pH in the mouth, the protein changes shape, activates those same receptors, and triggers the brain's perception of sweetness. The food itself remains sour. The tongue does not detect it that way. Sweetness appears where none exists. Laboratory testing confirmed the implications. The berry itself contains very little sugar. It does not raise blood glucose. It does not stimulate insulin release. It does not feed gut microbes the way sugar does. The effect is mechanical, temporary, and local. Once saliva washes the protein away, taste returns to normal. 30 minutes for some people, up to 2 hours for others. No calories added, no metabolic debt incurred. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, researchers and entrepreneurs in the United States began to understand what this meant. At the time, The American food system was already deeply dependent on refined sugar and increasingly dependent on artificial sweeteners. Diet soda was exploding. Low-calorie products were booming, diabetes rates were climbing, obesity was becoming a public health concern rather than a personal failing. And here was a plant that offered sweetness without chemistry, without synthesis, without patents. One company moved first. The Miraculin Corporation, founded in the early 1970s, attempted to commercialize miraculin as a low-calorie sweetener for diabetics and dieters. Pills were produced. Taste-altering tablets were sold briefly. The concept was simple. Instead of reformulating food, you reformulate perception. Sour foods become desserts. Bitter foods become treats. Vegetables become palatable. Sugar becomes optional. Then the regulatory machinery engaged. The US Food and Drug Administration did not ban miracle fruit. It did something far more effective. It classified miraculin as a food additive. That single classification changed everything. Under US law, food additives require extensive safety testing before approval, including toxicology data, long-term consumption studies, and formal petitions funded by the party seeking approval. For a synthetic compound, this cost is absorbed as part of product development. For a naturally occurring protein that cannot be patented, there was no incentive for anyone to pay. The Miraculin Corporation collapsed. Pills vanished from shelves. The fruit itself remained legal to grow and eat, but its only commercially meaningful use, as a food ingredient capable of replacing sugar, was frozen in regulatory limbo. This distinction matters. People often say miracle fruit was banned. It was not. It was neutralized. It could be sold as a novelty. It could be eaten whole. It could be discussed in academic journals. But it could not enter the food supply in a way that would disrupt existing markets. And the timing was not accidental. By the late 20th century, sugar was no longer just a crop. It was an infrastructure. Global sugar production exceeded 180 million metric tons per year. The artificial sweetener industry, built on compounds like aspartame, sucralose, and saccharin, generated tens of billions of dollars annually. These molecules were patentable. They were shelf-stable. They were easy to transport. They were easy to regulate because they were invented. Miracle fruit was none of those things. It grew slowly. It required acidic soil. It could not be patented. Its active compound degraded with heat. It did not fit into factories. More importantly, it broke the economic model. Sugar and artificial sweeteners are sold by volume. Miracle fruit is consumed by experience. One berry replaces an entire meal's worth of sweetness. There is no repeat dosing within a sitting. There is no escalation. There is no addiction loop engineered through blood sugar spikes and crashes. For an industry built on perpetual consumption, that was not innovation. It was extinction. Publicly, the justification was safety. Miraculin acts as a protease inhibitor. It can interfere with protein digestion in vitro. That triggered caution. Regulators asked for more data. More studies were required, but no one funded them. There was no financial upside to proving a natural protein safe when it could not be owned. The result was paralysis disguised as prudence. Meanwhile, outside the United States, the story diverged. In Japan, miraculin was approved for use. In West Africa, the fruit continued to be eaten as it always had been. In the European Union, miracle fruit was placed on the novel foods list, requiring safety assessment before commercialization. In 2021, a Spanish company received approval to sell dried miracle berries in the EU. The sky did not fall. Hospitals did not fill. Taste receptors behaved exactly as predicted. Back in the United States, enforcement tightened quietly. In 2011, the FDA issued import bans on miraculin products from specific origins, including Taiwan, classifying them as illegal, undeclared sweeteners when added to food. Not everywhere. Not always. Just enough to make large-scale commercialization impossible without approval. The message was clear without being spoken. Do not cross this line. The consequences extend far beyond novelty tasting parties where people bite into lemons and laugh. Sugar consumption in the United States averages more than 60 pounds per person per year. Excess sugar intake is directly linked to obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and fatty liver disease. The CDC estimates that over 37 million Americans have diabetes, with another 96 million classified as pre-diabetic. Artificial sweeteners were marketed as the solution, yet studies continue to show mixed results on metabolic health, gut microbiome disruption, and long-term outcomes. Miracle fruit does not claim to cure disease. It does something more threatening. It makes unhealthy defaults unnecessary. Sour fruits become desserts. Bitter vegetables become satisfying. Unsweetened foods become accessible. Registered dietitians studying miracle berries consistently return to the same observation. When sweetness can be accessed without sugar, people naturally reduce refined sugar intake. Not through discipline, through substitution. Clinical studies reinforce this. In controlled tasting experiments, participants report increased sweetness and reduced sourness in foods like green apples, lemonade, and goat cheese after consuming miracle berries. Appetite improves in patients experiencing taste loss from chemotherapy. Dietary variety increases. Sugar intake decreases without conscious restriction. And yet, the fruit remains sidelined. From a balanced regulatory perspective, officials can defend every step. Food additives require safety data. Protease inhibitors warrant caution. Novel foods demand assessment. No conspiracy is required when bureaucracy alone can stall adoption indefinitely. But incentives matter. When the burden of proof is placed on those who stand to gain the least financially, the outcome is predetermined. The miracle fruit exposes a structural truth about food regulation. Safety is expensive. Approval favors those with capital. Nature does not come with investors. Today, Syncypalum dulcificum still grows slowly, still requires patience, still produces 2 crops a year after long establishment, still thrives in acidic soils most agriculture ignores. Transgenic tomatoes have been engineered in laboratories to produce miraculin because tomatoes fit supply chains better than shrubs. The irony is complete. Instead of adapting systems to nature, nature is being redesigned to fit systems. The fruit is not illegal in the way poisons are illegal. It is illegal in the way threats to profit are illegal, allowed to exist, forbidden to matter. From West African forests to Japanese laboratories to American regulatory files, miracle fruit has followed a familiar arc. Discovery, promise, containment. Not because it failed, because it succeeded too cleanly. The sugar economy depends on dependency. Artificial sweeteners depend on ownership. Miracle fruit depends on biology. One of these cannot be controlled. And that is why, 50 years after scientists proved it works, the fruit that can make sugar obsolete remains a curiosity instead of a staple, a party trick instead of a policy tool, a whisper instead of a solution. It was never about whether miracle fruit was safe. It was about whether the system could survive a sweetness that could not be sold by the pound. If this video changed the way you see what ends up on your plate, stay with this channel. Every subscription, every share, every quiet moment of attention keeps these forgotten solutions alive. Some things disappear because they fail, others disappear because they work too well. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you in the next one.